All right, everybody, Medium Brandon Ross, and we are here to celebrate happy birthday, JD Vance. And JD, I can't think of a better thing to give to you than an astrology reading about your candidacy for vice president, your relationship with Donald J. Trump, and really kind of a look at who you are as a person as well as a political figure. I mean, after all, at the end of the day, what makes this country run is the people that are running it. Wouldn't you agree with that? Well, listen, I'm not going to claim I know everything, so I'm going to actually look off screen here, and I'm going to take a look at the Wikipedia page just to get a good idea of as to who he is, because like a lot of people, unless you're really immersed with it, you don't really know a whole lot of background. And I'm not going to really give a lot of credence to a lot of the nonsense, the couch stuff and what have you. But I do think he should be held accountable for some of his thoughts and views about, say, cat ladies and kind of his views on, you know, how misogyny should kind of be the tome of the day. That is well within it. I don't really care what he does with couches, nor do I care what you do with couches, which is why I believe in freedom. Enjoy your couches. But just to take a look at this, he comes from a very kind of muddied background, and there was a lot of stuff made. And the thing that made me really kind of do a deep dive on JD Vance to begin with is the name change. Because whenever I hear name change, I'm kind of like, okay, you know, when a woman gets married in traditional settings, and again, this isn't the way it's supposed to be or needs to be moving forward, but you know, in the traditional sense, it's, you know, the woman would take on the man's name and so forth and so on. It was a property thing, a lot of bullshit and whatever. Women will still believe that it's an honorable thing because you're creating a new family, and that's just where the merge lane is. And other people are kind of like, hey, no, I'm going to keep my name. You keep your identity. We're going to form a new thing. Wherever your philosophy is in that, that's cool. Well, when I hear a man change their name, I think either one of two things. Either one, they're marrying a strong woman or somebody that has a stronger name, so to speak, or they've been through some stuff, you know, for whatever that is, sometimes criminals, sometimes whatever. And I have a level of empathy here for JD Vance because he came from a really sullied background. He had an alcoholic mother. He had some changes. He was raised by his grandparents. He had a stepfather come in. He had somebody else really influence his life, which is why he changed his name initially. It changed again because he wanted to realign it with the people that were really kind of connected to him. He has his Juris Doctorate. Now, I want to kind of like fast forward this a little bit. He has his Juris Doctorate from Yale. By the way, I may or may not have spoken at an Ivy League college. And I will tell you that they're traditionally progressive when it comes to the legal minds there in terms of how they like to teach and how they like to really kind of challenge it. But it is a good, fastidious law school. It is arguably still one of the top five, certainly in the top 10 in the country. He did this after serving in the military, and he went through a GI Bill to pay for that school. And I'm pausing right here to point out that he has received United States subsidy to gain his education. I want you to remember this, because I think when you talk about somebody's background and kind of where they kind of come from, you have to understand that, like, how did they get here is a really kind of important thing. And for him, he, you know, and he was decorated. He was decorated. He was a very good soldier. He was an excellent soldier. He even was a combat correspondent. He worked in public affairs. He was active duty, boots on the ground, whole 9 yards. Then he went on to he actually went to Ohio State University first, then got his law degree from Yale. Then he identified as a conservative member of many different aspects of it. He went and studied international law in Canada. I think all of this stuff is actually really important, and I think it's actually impressive. You know, I hope you understand why it is that I'm talking about this, because there are attributes in his chart when I talk about them that you'll be like, wow, okay, this is some cool stuff. And when I start to kind of do some comparison, I hope you're really going to see where I go with this. So he also, he was not necessarily, and by the way, the last time he changed his name was because of marriage. And he chose to do that at that time just because that was when the next line of paperwork we're in, right? There's some speculation as to whether or not he was actually adopted by his grandparents. What is important is that his grandparents stepped up, right? So this kind of idea of surrogate family is very prevalent in his background. Okay, let's just take it at face value. And again, I mean, I might not agree with his politics, but his upbringing and his ability to kind of be nose to the grindstone. You need discipline in order to get through the military. You need discipline in order to get through Ohio State and then Yale Law. He then went on and started writing books. He wrote a book called Hillbilly Elegy. I have not read it. I have read the summary of it, which is part of my research into this. He did this kind of after he started working in his political career. He was a law clerk for a U.S. District Court judge. He worked for a law firm for a while as kind of a corporate lawyer. He's practiced law. He actually was in San Francisco for a time, which, he'd worked for a venture capitalist, which is kind of an interesting curveball. So you begin to kind of see that he was definitely trying to find his mark. Like, hey, I can do this work, but are you going to pay me? And if you're not going to pay me, I'm going to move on to the next thing. So he writes this book, and then the book did okay, and then it really took off when he started his political career. It did end up on the New York Times bestseller list, and then of course it was kind of like, he was getting accolades like, hey, he's the voice of the Rust Belt, which is of course Ohio, Kentucky, West Virginia, Western Pennsylvania. He's kind of in that standpoint. Ron Howard grabbed the film. It was released on 11/11/20. Not a good time to have a release done since the pandemic had just started, but did okay. Being an Ohio politician, and Ohio is a very Republican state. It's not even considered a swing state. It's like a 55-45. Even when Democrats poll well, they don't vote well. They went up against Tim Ryan, who was the Democratic nominee, and he really kind of got thrown up against it. And you can do some reading as to kind of. It always seems like some of these guys that shift gears, they do something shady, either because they don't know the rules, which, okay, there's a lot of rules when you're a candidate, or he just willfully knew it and kind of broke it. I am going to give him the benefit of the doubt, though, because he was never convicted, but he's always had kind of a grift thing going on the side. He's got some key investments that have always kind of been... kind of in the backloft. He's worked with a lot of investment firms, including with Stephen Case, who was the AOL founder way back when. He's also done things with different financial backing companies. So he's got a lot of ties with financial institutions, which is something that I kind of went, there we go. He's also part of an investment group that helped Rumble really kind of lift off. And maybe this is a bit of a grift of him and Trump being like, hey, I got this little social media thing too. Yeah, we'll kind of see how that goes. His run for the U.S. Senate, he really, he got money from all of his tech firms, which is just kind of like, just got to kind of, look at that. He has done some bipartisan work, though. I mean, this is the part where, in a vacuum, forget about the top of the ticket, just in a vacuum, JD Vance, he has worked with Raphael Warnock to lower the price of insulin. He co-signed a bill for that. He also collaborated with Elizabeth Warren to claw back the too big to fail part of it, which was probably more of a Republican thing since it was an Obama initiative. But then again, he's also kind of stood, by Marjorie Taylor Greene for a bill criminalizing gender affirmation care for minors. It's kind of like what? He's all over the place politically. So, there's that as well. He also kind of got his hand caught in the cookie jar about He got his hand caught in the cookie jar with the PPP style funds. He was found to have had some ties to them, although not directly. He was advising clients, so he was kind of like he had to remember he was a senator and he shouldn't have been talking about that stuff anymore. And it looks like he was. He didn't get a slap on the wrist, but they basically said those are the rules. Please follow that. I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing. Now, this is something that happened in his district. And by the way, this is when a lot of the stuff really kind of went crazy. He had a delayed response in the derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, which is his district, right? It's a state. His office released an official statement days afterwards, almost 10 days, almost 2 weeks. And he sent a message on social media, just basically saying we're working with the people of whatever. And it's kind of like your official statement is like, I mean, it would be kind of like me saying, hey, I really want to tell you that when we lost that game to St. Michael's, I really should have been shooting better on that day. You know, that game was in 1986, guys. And I was wide right all day. It was terrible. John DeMello ate me up. Anyways, it's a shout out old school. Anyway, so in the Senate Committee for Banking, which he's got several other committee assignments, housing, securities, you know, these are the things that kind of make me scratch my head. It's like on one side of it, it's like, we don't want people that have that kind of exposure or tie, but how else are you going to get that experience to be able to speak intelligently about, you know, SEC terms or insurance terms or investment terms if you haven't swam in those waters? And I think this is kind of part of the muddiness of like, damned if you do, damned if you don't. You can either have somebody completely ignorant or have somebody that has that, and then you have to rely on their moral compass in order to get them through. And by the way, most of the time, whenever JD Vance has kind of been held accountable, he's kind of said, you know what, you're right, I'm sorry. The things that he doesn't seem to be able to say, though, are the things when he's held accountable, when it's like, hey, I think that, you know, we're being run by, you know, use the big word oligarch, corporate oligarchs, which is hysterical because we don't have oligarchs in this country. That is a Russian term, JD. I don't know if you know that or not, but we are not Russia. Still not. Even though they helped in the 2016 elections, doesn't mean that they're part of the country now. But what does kind of, you know, derail him in a big way, forget about his verbiage, which always pay attention to the verbiage. You know, the childless single cat ladies, you know, that don't have any children and stake in the future. If he had framed it differently and kind of say like, you know, to the same thing of like, if we put people with banking experience on the banking committee, why shouldn't we have people that have children in committees that have children? Now you're getting into definitions. And of course, he criticized Pete Buttigieg. This is years before he went through his adoption and his troubled adoption, might I add. And I mean, it was an incredibly insensitive thing because in a vacuum, you can't claw that one back. But on the other side of it, it's like if he was trying to make a point to say, hey, let's have experts be a part of this, you can kind of sort of see his point. Deranged, I don't necessarily agree with it, but at least it followed a logical progression, right? The other things that he's involved with that I think is really kind of interesting is that he is on he's on the Committee for Commerce, Science, and Transportation, and it took you 10 days to talk about that one. So he's on a committee that actually reports to the Transportation Director, Pete Buttigieg. Communications, Media, and Broadband Subcommittee. Thank you very much. Net neutrality, you douchebags. Oceans, Fisheries, Climate Change, Manufacturing Subcommittee. Again, his platform doesn't really speak to that. Space and Science Subcommittee, Senate Special Committee on Aging. Not entirely sure what that is, but, you know, so be it. So, you know, here is somebody that has benefited, you know, came into life really kind of sideways, took advantage of some of the compatriotic bills and subsidies that would be the prime opportunity for someone in his position to either equalize or get ahead a little bit, not necessarily give a disadvantage to, but to give him the things that he needed, like through a GI Bill. And then in consequence, he's been able to capitalize on that, get a law degree, be able to get ahead, and now he's kind of here. Now, does he remember where he came from? Does he remember whatever? You know, his personal life is kind of interesting because, again, it's one of these incredible curveballs. about who he is, right? You know, his personal life, he is married to a woman of Indian descent. So by technicality, he is very much, you know, he's very much somebody that should at least understand inclusion and diversity. However, the mindset in his alignment with Project 2025, and his fingers are all over this, is that women's places in the home, you are meant to be bred, you are meant to be serving, you are meant to be an offshoot of, you know, you're meant to be the pinky in the hand. You're not meant to be the hand. And that is a huge thing. And when you have behind the scenes pushing for him to become the vice president, that's where you start to kind of like scratch your head, because the people that really pushed for him to become the vice president candidate with Trump, they weren't political savvies at all. Because when you look at JD Vance on paper, he literally brings nothing to the strategic ticket. And by the way, I'm going to show you astrologically, he's really kind of an heir apparent to Donald J. Trump. And you're like, what? So I'll get to that part of it. So behind the scenes, Don Jr. was a huge advocate of JD Vance. Huge advocate. He thought the idea that he could write a book, you know, why don't you try and read a book sometimes? But to write a book, you also had, you know, Tucker Carlson, who the last I heard was not a very good, judge of character in a lot of different ways, and he would always slant to the right anyways. By the way, didn't Tucker Carlson call Donald J. Trump like human scum at some point? Did he call him Hitler? No. That was JD Vance. That was JD Vance. By the way, also he had the support of David Oliver Sacks, who is a very interesting person in all of this too, because of his internet investments and his dialogue with net neutrality. And then you also have Elon Musk, who is infamous for all of his nonsense and all of his worldviews and what have you. I mean, I think if you want to do a deep dive on Elon Musk, just type in Elon Musk and children, and you'll really kind of understand what's going on with him. But this isn't a video about Elon. This is a video about JD Vance. But it is about how the people that are supporting him might be defining where he's going in this. So let's take a look at the astrology here. The astrology is kind of an important dynamic where he's really got some key things here. First of all, he's got this 12th house activated. He's born on August 2nd. See how the video rolls out like that? Gosh, Brandon, it's almost like you're paying attention. But look at how intricate this chart is. This is known as a bull chart, where you are really kind of, if you could cut it in half or really just above half, you would have most of your signs and symbols within that. All of his planets are definitely between 12 and 5. You know, the ones that are external from that, the North Node doesn't count. The nodes actually don't count in that because you're always going to have an opposite. But you have Chiron, again, which is a symbol of healing, and he has a North Node in conjunct with that. Just want to make sure you guys kind of get a primer. And then you also have Lilith. So you really only have this kind of like hurt, wounded feelings going on. And you have, and let me just start to unload on this. I'm going to start on the least complicated part, looking at Lilith on the descendant here in square to the Chiron. This is sheer definition of you have been hurt. You have been betrayed. The Chiron Lilith square is about, and it's mutable. So he's not going to, it was done to him. It was influenced onto him. So the North Node in conjunct to the Chiron is, and in Gemini, we'll just pick apart the whole thing, in the 10th house, keep picking it apart, is that he is going to be hurt. It is going to be in public. He will work it out in public, and there is a purpose for him to be shown as predominant as he is to be broken. So I think we're still at the tip of the iceberg of finding out how much pain JD Vance has been through. I still like this. This right here stopped me in my tracks. There'll be some other things. Wait till I get to the comparison of him and Trump, because there's a lot of similarities. I'm going to call them similarities. Oh, look at that! I'm so savvy. There's similarities. But just that as a food starter right there, man, as your appetizer right out of the gate, pain. Now, let's kind of go back towards the 12th house here. He is a Leo, and he is a Leo rising. Now, he is not a conjunct Leo rising, so this minimizes a little of the zealousness that Leos might have. This reduces the idea of where his gumption may be. Like, he might be able to be a little more level-headed, right? Vesta sitting in conjunct with the sun means that he's going to go through a healing journey that the world's going to see. So I expect JD. I don't think this is the only time we're going to see of JD Vance, win or lose. I actually think that this is the beginning and the start of it. If somebody told me that they had looked at the astrology of JD Vance and said he's the one you want as a running mate, you need to get him into the public eye today, I would agree with them. I would just agree with them. Now, if you look at it politically, everybody's going, why would you pick this guy? You already got Ohio. You're not gonna change the needle in another state. You know, even if you had gotten the North Dakota, governor and gotten those extra 3 votes, is it 3 or 4? I don't know what the electoral college is up there. That still would have moved the needle more than having, the 14 you're already going to get from Ohio. Ohio's not going to go Democrat. They're just not. It's just the way it is. The Rust Belt is rusty. It's just where it is. But to continue on with the chart, he is at a 27-degree rising. Well, didn't we just have a conversation about the 27th degree in fixed signs and how it's affected by the sign of Algol? Well, Algol is sitting in his 10th house. It's sitting in his 10th house, right? Ooh, what does that mean? Because, of course, you're at 22 degrees and 27 degrees, but this 22 degrees means the 27 degrees is right here and is conjunct with the North Node. In other words, his North Node is conjunct with the demon star. Ooh, in the 10th house. Where have I heard this before? Give me a second. Give me a second. Give me a second. You also have Mercury at 23 degrees, Leo sitting right on top of the ascendant. All this is in the 12th house. This is either he's going to be awesome and a magic maker, or it's going to go bad and going to be shame. There ain't no two ways there, hillbilly. Either he's going to be a good old boy, never meaning no harm, or he's going to be like, yeehaw, get the rope. Ugh. He can go either way. And by the way, a polarizing chart like this can make you very dynamic. It can also make you very hurt. It can give you a different way to push out the pain. Right? Now, Mercury in Virgo, in the first house, means that he wants to talk a good game. He can talk a good game. He can be very virtuous. Do I think he's faithful? I mean, it's none of our business whether he is or not, but if he says, hey, listen, I haven't done it, this may actually be a truth serum that might be very good for the general public. Mercury in Virgo is a natural setting. It overtones the double-facedness. It is a key major balancer if you are dealing with a Gemini. So if you're looking for a balanced ticket in terms of astrological traits, that's a good one. I don't know if he can overcome the pain of the Chiron Lilith, though, just to let you know. Then, taking a look at the third house, you have the moon in Libra, which is, listen, he's a romantic, whether it's with inanimate objects or not. He's a romantic. He's going to be romantic with how he approaches things. he's going to be a romantic in terms of like how he talks. This also gives him an eloquence with Pluto as well as Saturn. So even though he's kind of got this hillbilly thing, I think he actually loses some hillbilly traits because he is kind of well spoken. I don't agree with everything he says, but he uses punctuation well. So that's something to recognize. The other thing to point out here are his 29s. He has a Pluto at the 29th degree angle in Libra. Now, that is actually, it's a little bit of a softer sign to have Pluto in, but the 29th degree anarch really kind of goes up the notch. And either you're going to feel like you're all-inclusive or even in charge, or you may feel like you're totally left out in the cold. So there it is. So, and it's a wide conjunct to the moon. That's actually doing him a favor, not necessarily us. We would have, it would have exposed him a little bit more, but that wide conjunct, I think, lets him not be overly emotional. But he's a good time. He's a good time. Mercury, I'm going to talk more about the Mercury here in a second, but the Saturn sitting in Scorpio at 10 degrees in the third house means that there's kind of like he kind of has a natural rebellion against where he's at. So this lends itself to a little bit of unpredictability, but an unpredictability to something that he feels the need that he's got to be the superhero. So this is great if you're choosing a vice president candidate. You go, I need somebody who can kind of step up. But as we know, Donald Trump isn't looking for people that are strong-willed and free thinkers. He wants people that are sycophants and whatever. He didn't look at this part of his chart between the Mercury and the Saturn. I think those two in combination, and they do not play off of each other, which is okay, because I think that allows it to be an independent thinker. But look at the sun and how the sun plays off of Saturn and Pluto and the moon, because 10 degrees Leo to it's a pure square, right? Leo to Scorpio here for Saturn, that's a square. So that could mean that he could get really stuck in the mud. He could be really almost vindictive if he doesn't get his way, and he could talk shit about people. Like, he could call you, I don't know, a Hitler. So that's where some of that comes from, right? And then you have Mars in Scorpio. And again, this is kind of, I'm going to get you back and you're not going to see it coming. I don't think that's a good trait of anybody. But at 22 degrees angle, what he's really going to focus in on are people that hurt him emotionally. Are going to be people like, I asked you out 5 times. He may eventually say, I chose my wife because I thought I could save her. Or I chose my wife because I thought I could control her. That placement lends itself to that kind of mindset in that 4th house. In other words, like, I'll be the man. I'll take care of you. Maybe you watch some Dudley Do-Right up there in Canada. But the aspect of that isn't acted upon with, it's a wide, it's not even a conjunct, but you've got the South Node and then you've got Uranus in Sagittarius. Now, Sagittarius in the 4th house is really kind of an alternative view and an impulsive view, kind of doubling down on that. Is his wife someone, the first person that he met, or the first person that said yes? Maybe. Possibly. Is it necessarily negative? No. It does indicate things like alternative style families. Does it mean that he's gay? No. Does it mean that he married someone that is not of his race? Yes, absolutely. And by the way, can we get rid of all of that race talk? I mean, can we actually evolve? I don't give a shit that she's Indian. Is she a good person? Is she a good mother? Does she take care of the kids? Do the two of them have an understanding on how they work and operate? By the way, just in case all of you know, whether it is race or whether it is country, we are all in mixed races now. We are all in mixed commodities. Very rarely does an Italian marry an Italian, or an Irishman marry an Irish woman, or an Irish man marry an Irish man. But we're in a place now where we are global, and we've been global our entire existence. And it's really only a matter of time before that mold really kind of goes in that way. And depending upon where your gut check is on it, depends upon whether or not you're phobic about it or not. But anyways, so we have got, just want to wrap up this Vance part of it, and then I want you guys to tune into part 2. So you're going to want to click like and subscribe. Thank you so much for those of you that are members here. It's a few bucks a month. It helps me kind of behind the scenes be able to kind of like free up time during my week, so that it's not always doing readings, home parties, and events. Sometimes I need a couple of days. Those actually help me out during those days. And be sure to get part 2 about this with JD Vance as we take a look at him and Trump in combination. But just to wrap this up, you have Neptune in the 5th house, also in Sagittarius at the 29-degree anarch. Well, what does this mean? He is amped up. He is super dreamy. So his ability to lie in conjunct to Jupiter is huge. He could be dreamy McDreamer pants. Again, Sagittarius is kind of a little bit of a squirrely thing, so if he was ever to really kind of make something up, he's going to make it up on the fly. It won't necessarily be super well thought out, which I actually think is a good trait, that you can kind of be like, yeah, no, that's not really the way it is. I'm going to have to get back to you. It might mean that he has to hold himself accountable. And then with that in mind, will be a very good thing. It could also be a horrible thing, because he could start and perpetuate something if he is able to kind of really look into it and work it and what have you. It is trine. Actually, I think it's a full square here to Jupiter, Mercury is. So you're dealing with, actually it is trine to Jupiter, because he's able to tell tall tales here, guys. He's able to like really expand on stuff that makes it like cray-cray. Very interesting. Very interesting indeed. Well, listen, guys, I want to thank you guys for joining me for this one. Remember, click like and subscribe. Get ready for part 2 with Trump and Vance together. I think you guys are going to like it. See you soon.